If you ever listen to the whispers of Liyue, you will hear a very fascinating debate that exists in the walls of the City of Contracts. The discussion of life and death has constantly plagued the story of Teyvat. From curses to remnants, the circle of mortality is such a fallible concept that the question of its sanctity is constantly contested and debated on in the lore. And one of such debates is between the esteemed director of the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor and the benevolent and courteous physician of Bubu Pharmacy. So today, welcome to the coverage of Liyue's ancient debate, the morality of the circle of mortality, where I'll be covering two fascinating and heartfelt perspectives regarding the laws of life and death. Disclaimer: this video isn't your average lore or theory coverage, but instead kind of an expansion of ideas. I will be presenting how Genshin's lore tackles both of their arguments from a grand perspective, and it's up to you as a viewer to see which of their arguments have the most merit. But there's no right and wrong, because Genshin does a fantastic job opening both sides of the argument. What I'll be doing today though is instead giving you a wider perspective on why they both think this way, because this argument is hardly black and white. So let's begin with Baiju's perspective. In the universe of Genshin, immortality comes in a myriad of forms, but human-attained longevity and pseudo-immortality is far from impossible. The world of Genshin has several NPCs that have created creatures that can survive for hundreds of years, even some mortals who have willingly or unwillingly expanded their lifespans to beyond the regular. So Baiju's perspective on immortality, especially as a medical practitioner, is not unheard of. For context, we are told from Hutau and Qiqi's character stories that one of the reasons that Baiju took in Qiqi was to understand the magic that keeps her alive and immortal, potentially with the hopes of using her circumstance to bolster his research. However, that's definitely not to say that he treats Qiqi just like a random specimen. His treatment of Qiqi is careful and gentle, as with his other patients. His purpose for searching for immortality, though, is more in line with himself as a character instead of grander beliefs. There are subjective mantras that he abides by, so a lot of the further argumentation for his side is more so deep-rooted sentimentalities. But nevertheless, I believe that his perspective on the matter is still as valuable as Hutau's because it's one of the rare cases in Genshin where immortality is seen as a good thing. The conversation of immortality first begins with Baiju's own code as a physician. His motive is far more altruistic compared to other people in the lore who have pursued the same goal, and he questions if there truly is no ailment for the most intractable disease in the world: death. His life has been filled with plague and loss, as his old village was ravaged by a plague prior to his creation of the Bubu Pharmacy. As such, he eventually became fascinated with the prospect of curing the sick and preventing pain, and believes that finding an elixir to immortality is the ultimate cure to something that causes such immense grief. First, immortality to him should be pursued as a way to alleviate the pain of loss and the finality of illness. As a physician, he understands the consequence that sicknesses can give to people, but also how it can rob them of their time. Immortality, therefore, would become a way to save them if he could. But the second part of his pursuit of immortality is much sadder. Immortality for himself is a way to continue his endeavors as a doctor despite his weakening constitution. According to his lore, he has a contract with Changsheng called the Way of the Dragon-Dragging Jade Snake. This contract actually began with his master who took him in after his parents' death. The world is full of strange and complicated diseases, but Baiju's master was always able to provide treatment. Studying with his master, Baiju learned a simple truth: disease is dangerous, but it can ultimately be overcome with human intellect. Until the day finally came that Baiju's master was completely exhausted by the maladies brought on by a contract, and could hold no longer. Those who took this contract tended to die at a young age, and Baiju eventually also took up this contract. His medical prowess and renowned ability doesn't come for free. There's not much known about the contract, but it's what formed the Baiju we know today, practicing medicine to save lives and alleviate the pains and aches of humanity, but also embedding illness deep into his own bones, where they reside forever with no hope of release. We also learn from his character quest that amongst Changshan's secret art, he can transfer toxins and diseases onto his own body, which allows the original host to be alleviated from the pain, with the consequence of Baiju sacrificing his own life force. Honestly, I wouldn't doubt if this thing is considered a forbidden art, which is why it's all the sadder when Baiju seeks immortality as a way to preserve his life. Because he knows that at this rate, with how much toxins and diseases he's absorbed into himself, He knows that he is going to perish very, very soon, and immortality is probably his only way to make sure that while the pain is present, he is not going to be consumed by it. Because all that Baiju ever wanted was to alleviate the pain of others. Because the third reason for his immortality is much simpler. The contract is a lineage, passed on from descendant to descendant. Baiju, on the other hand, sees that this art is nothing short of a life transference that he doesn't want others to endure. Therefore, his immortality can ensure its continued use and his safety. He would theoretically be the ultimate panacea. He also doesn't want Changsheng to die, considering that when his predecessor found her, she was already at a weakened state. He actually questions Changsheng what would happen if he leaves her, and she responds that she will spend her final moments sleeping at the mountain. Immortality therefore means that he gets to keep both Changsheng alive and prevent another person from being sealed into this unfortunate fate. It's more so to protect others than keeping the art for himself, as he has stated that those who are bound by this contract can't help but be wooed with the possibility of overturning the laws of life and death beyond mortal means, very much like himself. But I will admit, while reading his lore, I was considering if Baiju's perception of immortality as an end-all be-all cure was a good idea, considering that prolonged illness without alleviation is a dangerous thing. Even if he were to achieve immortality, this will be a continuous existence of pain and suffering. We've seen in Baiju's lore that there are times he's barely able to move or attend to his patients, as his disease-ridden body becomes too much even for him. So that pulls me to the next side of the argument. Hutau's perspective is what I'm actually going to be giving a much grander narrative because Genshin time and time again reinforces the fact that humanity is not ready for immortality. Hutau argues that tampering with the natural circle of life and death can have dire consequences, so she believes that Baiju's pursuit of immortality and his caretaking of Qiqi are defiances to the natural order. While there's no denying that Baiju has been a pretty good guardian and caretaker to Qiqi in the grand scheme of cordiality and care, Hutau's perspective isn't unwarranted. We have seen how dangerous tampering with the natural flow of life and death could be, so much so that the academia considers it a cardinal sin. It's a cardinal sin to also interfere with human evolution, something that Baiju's elixirs would definitely collide with, considering that death caused by sicknesses and illnesses is unfortunately very natural. There's also the need to pass on properly in this world. For example, the border of life and death was once broken during the Archon War, when the remnants of the old gods plagued the world. This is something that the Yakshas have to face even to this day, and it took years for the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor to re-establish this balance. But the last point of Hutau's perception of immortality is just the genuine thought of it. Humanity is not ready to shoulder the grievances that come with longevity. Regular mortals that were put into stasis took a lot of time to get used to it. A good example were the Conrians, who slowly withered away because of erosion despite their physical bodies still maintaining their functions. They live in constant pain or loss, never having that necessary release. Naturally born immortals or creatures with longevity also face the tides of time, what with erosion or just the true passing of friends and families. In the end, a part of me wants to believe that while Hutau doesn't completely know the specifics of Baiju's circumstance, she understands that his pursuit of immortality would not only jeopardize the balance that her family has maintained for so long, but also cause himself horrendous pain in the long run. And even with Baiju's altruistic perspective, he understands the gravity of what would happen if he did manage to gain immortality. He understands that when this immortality is achieved, he'd be nothing short of being in constant pain. Again, immortality in his lore was never equated to a panacea. If anything, he was the panacea, the cure of all diseases. He would just absorb all the diseases into his body, and because he can't die, immortality would just cement a painful life for Baiju, regardless of his want and grief to save others. To say that Hutau and Baiju's relationship is strained isn't that far-fetched, but it's not like they have hostile intentions against each other as people. Baiju, for example, doesn't particularly dislike Hutau, just believing that she should be a bit more elegant with her business approaches, such as every time she used to kidnap Qiqi and get the Ministry of Civil Affairs involved. Hutau, though, is much warier of Baiju, and overall distrustful considering her many failed attempts to kidnap Qiqi for the sake of her beliefs. They also constantly have meals together, though, despite their differences, though the Bubu Pharmacy and the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor can agree on one thing despite their beliefs. The solemnity of death must never be disrespected, should it come to the patient eventually. When two parties do not align closely, they merely speak of etiquette, but when they align, One may speak of duty, for Bubu Pharmacy is in the business of healing the sick, and in the course of business, it is inevitable that there will be those beyond saving or at the end of their lives. Those with good fortune are cared for by their family, but those less lucky will breathe their last in Bubu Pharmacy. When this happens, Bubu Pharmacy and Wangsheng Funeral Parlor will jointly ensure their final rest is peaceful. The beauty of both of their stories is that they're two people that understand the importance of life. One wishes to sacrifice his own to keep others safe. One understands that death is what makes life meaningful. Baiju's story is filled with a mortal ambition to save and sacrifice, as well as to bend the rules of mortality to the best that he could if it means saving others. Hutau's, on the other hand, is a deeper look into the fact that immortality isn't all that great, and frankly, dangerous. That's it for me today, just a bit more of a somber story. My name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Post-editing Aster here, but I actually also wanted to say this. I realized that one of the biggest benefits of having someone like Baiju be an immortal is that he is a person for the people. He's a doctor. So that would also bleed into the argument that do certain people deserve immortality if it means for the greater good of everyone else, regardless of how that person feels? Do you think that some people deserve to be exemptions from death just because of their status in life, or their importance in society, or their wealth? Do you think that his altruistic purposes for immortality is enough to warrant him to actually pursue this while disregarding Hutau's argument that this could have dire consequences in the future? Just a food for thought. Oh, and I took the advice that a lot of people were giving me. I've decided that all of my South Park stuff is going to South Park with Aster instead of the main channel. Okay? So if you want to see some South Park stuff or some video essays about these two-dimensional characters, go right ahead. Feel free to subscribe. Link down in the description. And if you like D&D, I also have another channel. Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me.